Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 23rd episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this episode, I think I'll have to revisit this whole idea of the Ascension process from 3D to 4D, 5D, 7D, 27D, million D, whatever D. Because I just hear so many different videos, some saying that it's going to happen in 2020, some talking about the event, the shift, the energies coming in, and many of them give this ascension a specific form. And I'd like to clarify, um, well, again, trying to paint the big picture and put all those kinds of comments into perspective, a broader perspective. So the latest video that I've been checking out is this Cosmic Agency channel. I actually like many of the things they say, but um, let's just say that they have a very narrow kind of view on metaphysics from the perspective of one alien race, which is the Pleiadian Taygetas from Taygeta, Pleiadians from Taygeta, and they tell a certain story about what the matrix is, what this shift from 3D to 4D to 5D is. They talk about the moon basically being a military base from which there is a computer that controls perceptions of humanity and this holographic reality, and they call this kind of a matrix prison and us being suppressed and all kinds of other things. And I just like to put all of that into a broader context. Now, I'll use a few metaphors just to clarify things. The first metaphor is, for instance, imagine you are here in 3D, and then there is a big forest with plenty of trees, very thick, impossible to get through. And then on the other side is 4D or 5D, whatever you want to call it. And just imagine that on that level, there's like Pleiadians are here. Let's say those are Pleiadians. Let's say the Lyrans are here. Let's say Jesus is here. And you have angels. Let's say there are angels here. And all of these basically plant little pebble stones along the way for you to get through the forest and go to 5D. And you can take this path or this path or this path, and ultimately it doesn't really matter. You'll reach 5D regardless. It's just that you need to follow a certain events or certain certain events that basically correspond to what your prior beliefs are. So starting from whatever beliefs you have, starting from your mental structure, starting from what you have as far as knowledge in your brain, the way your brain is pre-wired, let's say, and the beliefs that you are almost, it's impossible to transcend for you at this point, then those beliefs then will lead you on one specific path along these pebble stones. And one of these can be, okay, the moon is like a military base that controls humanity and the reptilians are there and blah, blah, blah. One may be, we're actually just here as souls experimenting things and eternal souls, and so it doesn't really matter what happens and it's just an experience, blah blah blah. And you can have another one here. All of these are just little pebble stones that you follow to get through the forest and ultimately go into 5D or 4D or whatever you want to call it. But the path doesn't matter, and each path is unique to every person because no two people have the same beliefs. And so if and this is really related to the Cosmic Agency channel, if your beliefs is that you cannot get rid of this feeling, this sentiment that we are in a prison, and that our reality is an illusion, and that the real reality is somewhere above, and that we've been repressed, that you want to sort of feel like almost like you're a victim of some sort, and you buy into this whole evil elites thing, then there's no other way to guide you through these little pebble stones than to tell you a certain story that you will then follow. And you'll have the corresponding kind of events that will align you with 5D. And this process actually has been going on for all eternity. It has never stopped. So the Bible is one pebble stone that set humanity on a certain path at one point. Like you say, let's just assume that this is the past and this is the Bible here, and then this is Newtonian science. This is Einstein's relativity principle. This is quantum physics. This is spiritual awakening. And then from here, again, this is like really narrowing. This is the past. And then from here, you're actually here. And then that splits into also plenty of different paths. But this process has always happened. And the Bible was just one little pebble stone to advance humanity on an eternally long path of eternal, infinite evolution, basically. Going from these primitive pagan cultures of, where you have sacrifices, rapes, and all kinds of things, to something a little bit more refined, let's say, and then even more complex, and then yet more complex still, and even more complex, opening all the way to spiritual awakening. And then that also yields to even more complexity and splits into plenty of different things. But now for those that insist on giving this ascension of form, which is, there's nothing wrong with that per se, but I'd like to bring back this metaphor of the baby, which is in its mother's womb, about to be born. I'm such a bad drawer, but who cares? About to be born. That's one form, for instance, of what is happening. But you could say that on a deeper level, you could say that the birth process itself is just a symbolic representation of the level of consciousness that has been achieved by each living cell within that baby. So let's say that at the moment that every single cell in that baby's body sort of has this aha moment of, wow, we are actually part of this global organism called the human, and we need to behave and interact between each other in this and that, in such and such manner, in a harmonious way. The moment they sort of get that aha moment is the moment they're going to be born. And the birth is just a reflection or the outside manifestation, symbolic manifestation of a shift in consciousness which happened within. So the baby has a kind of aha moment within, and then without, or on the outside, it manifests as birth. But then, how do you think each single living cell, like we, of course, are used to seeing birth, and we see it all pretty much the same way as humans because we're looking at it from the outside. But how does that birth process actually is experienced by each individual living cell inside that baby? For instance, skin cells. How do they experience the birth process? Probably very differently, because they're directly exposed to the outside oxygen and the light, and they get to feel the slap in the back. They get to feel being washed. They get to feel air. How about the stomach cells? How do they experience the ascension or the birth process, which it can be the Ascension. It's the same thing. How do they experience it? Oh, they're going to receive milk now. They're going to the stomach is finally going to start to function. How do the lung cells experience the birth process? Now they're going to also receive air molecules that have to process. Does the hair cells experience this? Now they're not bathing in liquid anymore. Now they're on the outside. They're going to be dry. They're going to be, completely different, etc., etc., etc. And again, even for the skin cells, one skin cell won't experience the same as the next skin cell. For instance, the ones that get the slap on the back on the bottom will have a different experience from those that get the first blood sample, for instance, when you prick the skin of the baby to sort of get the first blood samples from the skin cells that get touched by the mother, the first, after birth, etc., etc. So there are a near infinite amount of individual ways to experience the same process. And that's what I'm trying to say when what bothers me kind of in these videos like that of the cosmic agency or other videos is that ultimately it's always about trying to find truth or a higher truth, and somebody like as if there is something that is false, kind of, there's like a false narrative, there's something that is trying to mislead us, but there is an objective truth that you can actually all agree on, or where you accumulate evidence and then suddenly that is what you should kind of align to, when that is absolutely not the case. It is one truth among many, which just, if you're attracted to it and if you are very interested by it, it is simply that you resonate with it because of the way that you think about this process. Because, for instance, you cannot let go of the feeling of victimhood, of being a victim of something on the outside, like the evil reptilians. Or that simply, and the event, I mean, for instance, the event, is it going to happen? Sure it will. The only reason it happens is because humanity at this point needs to have this kind of symbolic moment to sort of say we've arrived. It's like going through the gates of Disneyland. You know that you're in Disneyland once you've gone through the gate. And so every one of us needs to materialize some kind of event, which again is going to be based on your level, your consciousness, your beliefs, what how far you've kind of evolved, just so you know that something is starting, just to give you a kind of a point of a reference for understanding that things are different. Just like the stomach when it gets the first milk, just like the lungs when they get the first air, just like the skin when it's first bathed in light, just like etc., etc., etc. And it won't be necessarily synchronized. As you know, there are certain cells that see the light of day first when the baby comes out, and certain things happen first and then later. Like the stomach doesn't start functioning right away. There's just plenty of different things. So it doesn't have to be synchronous. It can be kind of asynchronous. But there's still this big shock, for instance, the cutting of the umbilical cord, and all of these are symbolics. I'm using this because it's the closest metaphor that I can find to the process that we're living through. But again, how futile do you think it is? And when I'm talking about 4D or 5D, how futile it is for one single cell in a body to ask what it actually is or means to be human. Do you think a single living cell can have an accurate representation of what it means to be human? We don't even have a comprehensive representation of what it is to be human. We're studying it our entire lives, and we still ask ourselves the question, who are we and blah 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 and who am I, and we're tortured about the whole complexity of us. Do you think a single living cell could deal with the level of complexity of understanding what it is to be human? All the cell can actually know is it needs to act in a harmonious way with other cells and that it is part of something bigger than itself. Once it knows that, it knows everything it needs to know. And again, it can go back um, to the essential, which is going within, finding what that cell is passionate about. In that sense, I really support the channeling of Bashar, which always emphasizes this idea of finding your passion and doing whatever feels most exciting to you at any given time, because that is exactly how each and single one of our cells is behaving. Otherwise, we wouldn't be alive. If they would find it tedious um, or boring or annoying or whatever you want to call it, to keep you alive, to play the role of the skin cell, to play the role of the stomach cell, then you would die within a matter of hours. And so, what I'm trying to say is basically keep your mind open minded. And what I'm kind of vibrating for myself is this event, the form that it takes, whatever form that is. I just want it to be, and it cannot be anything else, but I just want it to be um, reflective of my level of consciousness. And I want it to arrive at the right time. And I sort of trust the outside or some higher kind of process for the timing, for the form it will take, for all of these things. Because again, the birth process from our perspective happens exactly when it's supposed to happen. Um, that is after 9 months, when the baby is ready, and blah, 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 and a certain number of conditions. And it's kind of outside of the control of each individual cell inside that baby. At some point, it just clicks. And it's again, sort of the timing can be linked. We think it's linked to plenty of different factors, well, opening up of the vagina and all that stuff. But ultimately, it might be linked to simply this aggregate level of consciousness that is reached by each individual cell. Like when a certain percentage of living cells sort of know that they're part of this global organism and gain that kind of consciousness and that kind of awareness, and are ready to function in this harmonious way, that's when the whole process kind of starts. Makes much more sense to think of it that way. Um, and so I don't want to give it necessarily a form. I'm giving it a symbolic form just so I can kind of trust that this process is flawless and is bigger than me, much bigger than me, and also beyond my understanding. Even though I'm giving it a symbolic form, I know that this is just a very crude metaphorical representation for what is going to happen, and I'm just opening up myself for surprise. That's also one thing that the universe absolutely loves, is to surprise you. And that's why everybody likes to receive surprises. And nobody likes spoilers. Or very few people like spoilers. People like that kind of thrill of being surprised and taken off guard, and that something is going to be much more marvelous and beautiful than they've ever imagined. And so the takeaway basically is, don't be hard bent or stuck on trying to find one specific truth. Just adhere to whatever truth feels comfortable. for your personal level of consciousness. And again, there's no good or bad level of consciousness. Simply speaking, for instance, some people have a hard time looking at pictures from several dimensional perspectives. Like, for instance, if your consciousness is limited to that of the perspective of a particular skin cell, and you've suffered from a scratch or a bruise or a cut, then you might be in the kind of victimhood state and believing that somebody wants you harm from the outside, blah, blah, blah. You can tell yourself plenty of different stories for why you've suffered that scratch, but it just may have been from the perspective of this global organism, that scratch is nothing. It's just a part of the things that can happen in that being's life. Like when you scratch yourself, um, what kind of story do you think your cells are telling themselves about what just happened? Do you think they're saying that there's a conspiracy against them, that somebody wants to kill them, that there's genocide or whatever going on? Um, Probably not. Probably because they've achieved this kind of level of consciousness where they understand they're a global organism. They just take that as part of the experience of being part of that global organism. Um, for those of us that have not reached that kind of understanding, and especially the integration of both, which is you can both um, you can both as agree that from the perspective of those skin cells that suffered a scratch, it's a terrible, painful experience full of suffering, and it's not nice and all that stuff. And at the same time, that it's actually from a global perspective, it's fine, it's perfect. There's nothing that needs to be changed. And those two perspectives are absolutely not incompatible. And once you've been able to integrate those two, then you've reached a higher state of consciousness altogether. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you cannot, and if you're hard bent on just seeing your world from the perspective of just your specific particular experience in this world, and that's totally fine. It's just that it will probably be the kind of events that you're going to witness if you adhere to these kind of truths about the cabal, the evil elite, and all these kind of things. Understand that the events that you have to experience to get to 5D might not be the most positive or the most smooth or the most loving and whatnot, because you have still to transcend the whole idea of duality, polarity, um, and all those things. And if you need that, it's fine. If you need the experience, if you need experience, if you need the experience, that kind of experience, then by all means, just go for it. Because ultimately, the problem is that there's certain things that you cannot just sort of understand from an intellectual point of view or a theoretical point of view. Some things you just have to experience, because otherwise it won't ring true. It's like saying, from a theoretical point of view, I think that God exists. No, no, no. You have to actually have a certain experience to have a belief which rings true, which resonates at the right frequency, which means that you've fully integrated that kind of belief. And the same for this whole idea about being part of a global organism, the harmonious interaction, blah, 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 blah. All the things that I've just said, you may understand it from a theoretical perspective, just like you'd listen to a theologian back in school and you'd think like, oh yeah, that's interesting. But if you're not convinced, that means that you need the experience. It's like telling a 2-year-old, don't do this, you'll hurt yourself. Well, some of them get it, and some of them have to go through the experience to actually get it. And what is best? It's tailor-made. You cannot judge. You cannot say that it's better to understand things directly or go through the experience. Both are fine. So in this video, I'm just trying to enlarge the perspective, the point of view, to for those of you that are ready, basically, because I don't think that anybody else will see this video anyways, since I'm not really making a lot of publicity around this. So whoever is ready to hear it will. And to adopt this kind of open mind and adopt a kind of way of thinking for this 4D, 5D ascension process, to sort of recognize that the form it'll take, let yourself be surprised. And that whatever you think it will be, it will probably be much more than that, because again, how much can a single cell understand about what it means to be human? How much can a human understand to what it is to us being part of a global organism or one cell in something higher? I'm not really sure. And just pick the path that sounds right for you. A final metaphor I'll give is almost this idea of amnesia. It's like if you started from point A and then you drank so much that you forgot what you've done and you've ended up in point B, and you're like, wow, what path did I take to get there? What happened in the meantime? And there are plenty of different paths that you could have taken to get to the same point. And whatever path you choose retrospectively, it's almost as if point B was talking to its point A into the future, talking to its past and saying, oh, you've actually done this one. That's what you've done. And that's what the Pleiadians from Taygeta are doing, is basically reverse engineering the past from their present, from their point of view. They've transcended time, but that's basically what they're doing. So they're doing exactly the same thing as what we've been doing for hundreds of years, when we dig up skeletons and we try to reverse engineer how we got to exist on this planet. And some of them will find evidence of seeding by aliens. Others will find evidence of evolution. And ultimately, what you're doing without even knowing, because we're doing this unconsciously, is that you're sending information into the past. You're sending information to the ape saying, oh, you're going to become a human, so you better evolve. And you're sort of dragging them on this timeline of evolution. Or you're sending information to apes that they've actually been merged, or their DNA was merged with aliens from outer space, and that's what made humans. And they're taking another path. And so when you listen to the people from Taygeta, Pleiadians, they're creating this as they go. It's like trying to fill in the gap between frame 1 of a movie and frame 5978. And you just try to find the logical story that leads from one to the other. And you can imagine plenty of variations. It just all depends on what do you want to experience. What are your prior beliefs, which means that it'll set you on one specific course and not another. But ultimately, the point B, the point of arrival, it's unescapable in a way. You cannot escape it. We're just trying to bridge the gap between 2 points, and finding the best way for each of us personally on how to kind of, make the intermediary steps from one to the other based on our level of understanding of the universe, our level of consciousness, all of these things. So I hope you find this video interesting. Don't hesitate to comment, and see you in the next one.